This is what narcissists really want from you when you're not around. Have you ever noticed that even after you physically left a narcissist's life, or they've left yours, something still doesn't feel right? It's as though they're still around, still pulling strings, still present in the background of your mind. And maybe they are not physically, but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. The truth is, narcissists are never truly gone when they're not around. In fact, some of their most calculated and disturbing desires come to the surface only when you're not present. You might think that when you walk away or when they discard you, they move on, that they stop thinking about you, that they forget you. But the reality is far more disturbing and far more personal. What narcissists really want from you when you're not around isn't closure. It isn't peace. It certainly isn't forgiveness. What they want is control. What they want is energy. What they want is access to your emotional world, even in your absence, even after the door has closed. And understanding this is the key to reclaiming your power. In today's deep dive, we're going to uncover the hidden emotional agenda of narcissists, the secret things they crave when you're out of sight. Why do they keep stalking your social media silently? Why do they bring you up in conversations months or even years after the relationship is over? Why do they seem obsessed with keeping a narrative alive where they always come out on top? More importantly, we'll explore how your absence creates a psychological vacuum inside them and what they do to fill it. This episode will change the way you think about what happens behind the scenes when you're not there. You'll come to realize that walking away might have ended the contact, but for the narcissist, it triggered a desperate inner campaign to still keep something of you alive for their own benefit. So don't go anywhere, because by the end of this video, you'll understand not only what narcissists really want from you when you're not around, but how to use that insight to build emotional armor they can never penetrate again. Let's begin. At the core of narcissistic personality disorder is a profound lack of a stable identity. Narcissists operate from a fragmented and fragile sense of self, and much of their emotional and psychological functioning depends on how others reflect them back to themselves. In psychological terms, this is called narcissistic supply, and it's what fuels their internal world. Narcissistic supply isn't just attention or admiration. It's anything that confirms to them that they exist, that they matter, that they have power, control, or influence over others. Now here's the key. When you're around, they extract the supply directly through praise, attention, compliance, emotional reactions, and even fear. But when you're not around, especially after a breakup, no contact, or distance, narcissists don't just stop needing that supply. On the contrary, their hunger grows more intense. The absence of your presence doesn't create peace in their world. It creates a void. And this is where the darker side of their behavior begins to unfold. So what exactly do they want from you when you're not around? 1. They want your emotional energy, even if it's negative. Narcissists are addicted to your emotional reactions. Whether it's your anger, your pain, your longing, or even your silence, they interpret as evidence that they still matter to you. This is why so many narcissists do things from a distance that are designed to provoke you. They might post cryptic or attention-seeking things on social media. They might randomly contact your friends. Or they may suddenly show up in places where they know you might hear about it. These aren't coincidences. These are psychological fishing lines, attempts to get an emotional bite from you. The tragic irony is that even when you're trying to heal, try to move on, try to reclaim your peace, they're actively strategizing ways to invade that peace from afar. Because your emotional availability, even if it's directed at a wall, is still nourishment to their fragile ego. 2. They want to control the narrative. When a narcissist no longer has physical access to you, they still try to maintain emotional dominance by shaping how others see the relationship. They might smear you, distort facts, or twist the breakup story in their favor. Why? Because losing control over your perception of them is intolerable. Even though you're not around to defend yourself, they want to make sure the narrative remains under their control. They're deeply afraid that without their version of the story being accepted, they'll be exposed, not just to others, but to themselves. And the idea that you could be out there telling the truth about them, or even just quietly living your life without needing them, that's psychological death to someone whose self-worth depends on superiority and control. 3. They want to be remembered, even if it's through pain. In therapy, we often talk about how trauma bonds distort the perception of intimacy. Narcissists know this, intuitively if not consciously. They count on the fact that the more pain they cause you, the harder it might be for you to fully forget them. They want to leave an emotional fingerprint on you, one that stays even when they're long gone. If you still cry over what they did, if you still flinch when you hear their name, if you still check their profile, they see it as a victory. The idea that you could be indifferent to them is terrifying. So when they're not around, they're often hoping, sometimes obsessively, that they're still on your mind, that the emotional scar they left is still bleeding. Because for them, that bleeding means you're still under their influence. 4, they want you to doubt yourself. Self-doubt is one of the most effective psychological weapons narcissists use, and it doesn't stop when the relationship ends. In fact, narcissists often plant seeds of confusion and distortion that continue to grow long after they've exited your life. Things like, maybe it really was my fault, or was I too sensitive, or did I give up too soon? These intrusive thoughts are not yours alone. They are remnants of the narcissist's manipulation, still echoing in your inner world. When you're not around, what they want is for those echoes to remain. Because if you doubt yourself, you're less likely to hold them accountable. You're less likely to speak out. You're more likely to stay silent, to isolate, to avoid the healing that could set you free. And in that silence, they remain powerful. 5, they want you to break no contact. This one is critical. No contact threatens everything a narcissist needs to maintain psychological dominance. Your silence is not just inconvenient, it's terrifying, because it signals the loss of control, the loss of supply, and the rise of your autonomy. When you go no contact, the narcissist becomes increasingly desperate to regain some foothold in your life. And so, from behind the scenes, they might stalk your online presence, send flying monkeys, or trigger mutual memories designed to pull at your empathy. They want you to feel guilty. They want you to feel weak. They want you to miss them. And most of all, they want you to break that silence. Not because they want a genuine reconnection, but because they want proof that they still matter. 6, they want to live rent-free in your mind. When you're no longer physically available to the narcissist, they resort to psychological occupation. That means they want to dominate your thoughts, even when they're not there. And often, they've conditioned you to internalize their voice, so that long after the last argument, the last insult, or the last gaslighting conversation, you still hear them in your own self-talk. It might sound like your own voice questioning yourself. You're too emotional. You'll never find someone better. You're the problem. But it's not your voice. It's theirs, embedded into your psyche through repetition and emotional conditioning. This mental haunting serves a clear purpose. It makes them eternal. If they can't be in your life, they'll be in your thoughts. And every second you spend doubting yourself, reliving their words, or playing their imaginary scenarios in your head, is a second they stay relevant. They know they've left a mark. They just hope it's deep enough to delay your healing. Because in that delay, they continue to benefit from your emotional energy. Your confusion becomes their power source. 7, they want to erode your progress from afar. Narcissists often fear your healing more than they fear your anger. Why? Because healing means independence. Healing means emotional clarity. And most threatening of all, healing means you might finally realize who they really were all along. That's why even after a breakup or no contact, they might accidentally run into you, send a cryptic message, or try to just check in. It's rarely a genuine attempt to make peace. More often, it's a calculated move to disrupt your growth. They hope their sudden reappearance, no matter how minor, will destabilize your progress. One small interaction, one like on a photo, one message saying, "I hope you're okay," can open an emotional wound that had just begun to scab over. That's by design, because if you start to question your progress, you'll start to regress. And in that regression, they regain relevance. Narcissists know they don't have to be physically present to derail your healing. A little confusion, a spark of doubt, or a surge of hope is often enough. 8, they want to be idealized again, even as a fantasy. When the narcissist is out of your life, a strange psychological shift can occur, especially in people who are highly empathic or trauma bonded. Over time, you might begin to miss a version of them that never truly existed. The idealization phase, the love bombing, the passion, the early fantasy, can resurface in your memory like a siren song. And this, too, is what narcissists count on. They want you to forget the devaluation. They want you to forget the cruelty, the betrayal, the erosion of self-worth. They want you to remember the charm, the excitement, the promise of something beautiful. In fact, many narcissists will deliberately plant emotional time bombs in your memory during a relationship, like inside jokes, songs, or phrases, knowing these will echo after they're gone. They want you to romanticize them after the fact. Because if you do, you'll feel conflicted. And if you're conflicted, you won't fully detach. And if you don't detach, then in some energetic way, you still belong to them. 9. They want to be missed deeply. While healthy individuals miss people out of genuine love or connection, narcissists want to be missed for entirely different reasons. They want your longing to serve as proof that they were special, unforgettable, powerful. When you're not around, they fantasize about you sitting in your room thinking about them, comparing others to them, wondering if they're thinking of you. They want to be the impossible standard by which all others fall short. This isn't about affection. It's about ego. Your missing them validates a distorted belief they have about themselves, that they are exceptional, irreplaceable, even godlike. So even if you're silent, even if you moved on, they hope you're suffering without them. In their world, your pain is a tribute to their greatness. This is why many narcissists will subtly or overtly reinsert themselves into your awareness through mutual contacts, social media presence, or sudden online activity. They want to be impossible to ignore. 10. They want access, even if it's indirect. Narcissists hate boundaries, and they especially hate when you enforce them successfully. So when they can't get direct access to you, they'll often seek it through secondhand channels. This could be through your friends, your social media, your favorite places. They might start interacting with your old posts or even reach out to people close to you pretending concern or curiosity. Why do they do this? Because it keeps a backdoor open. They want to know what you're doing, who you're seeing, whether you're happy. Not because they wish you well, but because that information tells them how much power they still hold or how much they've lost. Access, whether digital, emotional, or energetic, is the currency of control for a narcissist. When you deny them that access, they often become desperate, manipulative, or suddenly sincere. But don't be fooled. It's not sincerity. It's surveillance disguised as sentimentality. 11. They want you to collapse first. Even after separation, narcissists turn the experience into a competition. Who's thriving more? Who moved on faster? Who appears happier? When you're not around, they obsessively monitor for signs that you're failing, floundering, or falling apart without them. And if they catch even a whiff of struggle, an emotional post, a sad quote, a comment taken out of context, they interpret it as victory. In the narcissist's mind, your pain post-separation proves their worth during the relationship. They don't see it as evidence of trauma or manipulation. They see it as evidence that they were essential. And they will go to great lengths to convince mutual acquaintances that you're still stuck on them, still affected, still wounded. It's not just about winning. It's about proving they were always in control, even now. 12. They want to be redeemed without accountability. Perhaps the most insidious thing narcissists want when you're not around is silent absolution. They want to be forgiven without ever apologizing. They want you to get over it, move on, or let it go, but without acknowledging what they did. In their world, time erases responsibility, distance dilutes damage, and silence equals pardon. This is why many narcissists try to circle back after months or years with soft approaches. I've changed, I've grown, I've been thinking about us. But notice what's missing: accountability, reparations, empathy. What they really want is to rewrite history without admitting fault. And if you entertain the idea of reconnection without requiring acknowledgement or growth, they take it as a sign that you're still pliable, still influenceable, still available to them on an emotional level. 13. They want the option to come back on their terms. One of the most deeply embedded desires in a narcissist's mind is the ability to return whenever they want. They may never say this out loud. They may never act on it directly. But what they truly want is to leave the door open, Not for love, not for redemption, but for convenience. They want to keep the option of accessing your life again when they need something, when they're low on supply, when they need emotional shelter, when another relationship has failed. They want to believe that no matter how much time has passed, no matter how much damage they cause, you'll still be available. This belief comforts them. It allows them to avoid facing the finality of their choices. It also gives them the illusion that they are still desirable, still wanted, still important. Even in absence, they want to hold that thread of imagined power. And so they may breadcrumb, check in periodically, or use nostalgia as a hook. But it's not because they miss you. It's because they hate the idea that they might have lost you permanently. 14. They want to imitate your strength and claim it as theirs. Narcissists often study the people they're closest to. They analyze what makes you empathetic, what makes you emotionally strong, what others love about you. And then they try to mimic it, not out of admiration, but out of envy and strategy. When you're not around, they may begin to wear masks that resemble you. They may start using your phrases, your coping mechanisms, even your healing language. They want others to believe that your growth, your wisdom, and your energy were always theirs to begin with. This is why, bizarrely, a narcissist may seem to transform after you've left them, suddenly becoming more spiritual, more self-aware, or publicly appearing as someone who has changed. But what they want isn't to evolve. They want to absorb the traits they saw in you and present them as their own. In doing so, they hope to reclaim the admiration they lost when you walked away. It's a psychological theft, and it's very common. 15. They want to believe you're still theirs. Above all, narcissists crave ownership, not in the legal sense, in the emotional, psychological, and spiritual sense. They want to believe that you still belong to them in some invisible way, that even if you're not talking, even if you're rebuilding, even if you blocked them and moved on, they still own part of you. They might say things like, "You'll never find someone like me," or "I made you who you are," or "You'll come back eventually." These are not statements of fact. They're projections of fantasy, because in their world, your identity is still tied to theirs. Your worth, your memories, your healing, they believe it all still loops back to them. This is why no contact is so intolerable for them. Not just because you're gone, but because it defies their entire worldview. You becoming truly independent is the one thing they can't emotionally process. It shatters the illusion that you were merely an extension of their grandiosity. And so, even in silence, even in absence, even across great distances, they're hoping that somewhere in your heart, you still belong to them. Conclusion, what you need to remember. So, what does all this mean for you? The survivor, the empath, the one who finally walked away? It means that your absence is not empty. It is powerful. Your silence is not void. It is healing. And your distance is not weakness. It is the ultimate act of self-respect in the face of manipulation. Understanding what narcissists really want from you when you're not around is not about feeding their ego with curiosity. It's about reclaiming your mental and emotional freedom. Because once you understand their motives, their tactics lose power. Once you see that the desire for control, access, memory, and emotional presence is rooted in fear, scarcity, and a fractured sense of self, you stop internalizing their behavior as your fault. Narcissists are not just obsessed with being adored when they're with you. They're obsessed with being remembered, longed for, and energetically connected to you when they're gone. But none of that is your responsibility. You are allowed to heal in peace. You are allowed to move forward without guilt. You are allowed to forget them entirely. You are allowed to live a reality where they no longer hold space in your heart, your mind, or your soul. And if you do feel them try and pull you back through memories, dreams, emotional flashes, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you were deeply affected by someone who studied your emotional blueprint and used it for their gain. But that blueprint still belongs to you. And now, you can rebuild it with stronger lines, clearer boundaries, and a deeper love for yourself. They wanted access, and you chose self-preservation. They wanted obedience, and you chose sovereignty. They wanted to haunt your mind, and you chose to clear the space. And that, in the end, is what truly breaks a narcissist's grip. Not revenge, not confrontation, but peace. Peace they cannot manipulate. growth they cannot share, freedom they can never follow. So, if you're ever wondering what a narcissist really wants from you when you're not around, remember this. They want everything, but they deserve nothing.